to me and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. It's everything you need just to want to see. And if you want to make it better, you give it to me, I'll grace it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop. Don't let the dream drop hop. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, Dr. Flynn, I'm super excited to have you on the show. You guys have quite the story, and it has led you down the path that you are currently on, which we're going to hear all about today. So thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on today.
So first of all, I'm excited to have you, but also let's get started with just talking about your story. That's how I typically introduce all of my guests. I have them tell their own story because oftentimes your mess becomes your message. And I find that most of the people in the health and wellness space, that is what gets them crazy about the things that they're doing.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm going to quote you on it. Your mess becomes your message. I do like that. Well, my mess was basically, I was a sick child and stuff and into my teenage years. And I was diagnosed as a juvenile delinquent, a lot of psychiatric things going on. My brain always going 100 miles an hour. My skin always feels like crawling. And because of those episodes and no help medically, it allowed me to search out other avenues. Now, remember, I'm 47 years old right now. This is back in the 80s and early 90s. That's not that common back then, obviously in the 80s especially. But episodes happened to me through as I was a child in my teenage years, and I started to actually really understand health. So at 13 years old, I started to actually really investigate health and then realize our current form of healthcare at that time didn't have any answers. You know, because we are very dominant right now, and we know this with everything that's going on in the last couple of years in the thinking of drugs and surgery, which cool, they have their place. But what we're trying to accomplish, what I know every listener wants, is they want to be a very healthy individual. Well, I'm sorry, but our current thinking of healthcare will never help us reach that. You know, and so I did. So I recognized as a teenager. And so I started to study nutrition. I started to study immunology based on what was going on with me because I had an immune issue causing psychiatric issues. And it led to the fact that I was eating eggs and other things I'm allergic to, which has caused my brain going 100 miles an hour. So as I started to find those food things and other things that started to do it, my brain started to calm down. I started to focus better. Started to, today I'd have been probably diagnosed as like Asperger's and things like that. But we know this. We know there's a gut-brain connection. We know there's things that can affect us psychologically. But then what happened is, as I decided to go, okay, listen, I love immunology because of my immune system. I love nutrition because of my history that way. I knew that I needed to do a little bit more. So I said, okay, listen, I want to find a doctoring program that will work with that. And looking into the medical field, I couldn't find anything. So I actually started looking to being a chiropractor that way too, because they're a little bit more holistic, more natural. And that added on to my whole thinking with what I had. And then all of a sudden, I'm almost through school. And then I met this wonderful woman who, for example, was told she couldn't have children. And obviously, to fast forward the story, all the doctors in the current medical field at this time, this is, the late 90s. And now, because I'm almost through my doctorate degree and everything, and I'm looking at, well, what I knew from my own history and what I learned from my undergraduate and my graduate schools and everything, and my continuing education, I'm sitting there going, that doesn't make any sense. And believe it or not, I started to dig deep on female hormone things. And to fast forward the story today, now I've been married to that woman for 20 years. We have 4 beautiful daughters. And I took all of my different ways of thinking and molded it into a form of healthcare that makes a lot of sense, not only to everybody, but especially to women, because 1 out of 3 couples have a hard time having children today. And that's been my whole focus, my major career, to where I started one office, in Green Bay, Wisconsin in 1999, and now having over 100 of them across the world.
Okay, this is fun because there's so many directions we can go. So I almost have to take notes and then revisit them because there's so much there. But it's funny because hormones, when a person goes to their allopathic doctor and they say, hey, I want to have my hormones tested, the doctor either says, A, that's not necessary, or B, they're fine. They're not looking at what time that lady is supposed how many days she's into her cycle, so they can accurately look at the hormones and where they should be. They're not looking at like, okay, what are some of the contributors to the fact this person may not be having a cycle? Like there's a whole lot of things there. And it's funny because I literally had a client the other day. I've been telling her for like a year that or not a client, but a friend. I've been telling her for like a year that we need to look at your hormones. We need to look at your hormones. And she's like, I'm not a doctor, so what do I know? Okay. And she literally sent me a message, said she finally decided to listen to me and find a functional medicine doctor, which is great. They ran a bunch of hormone testing and she sent me their results, and they were really, really bad, which I already knew they were based on the symptoms and things she was telling me. I knew what she needed. Here she was, though, in Western medicine, getting all of these migraine medications. They gave her a full hysterectomy, like all of these things that could have been prevented, right? And she sent me a message yesterday and she told me all of this. And I said, yeah, I had a seeking suspicion. And I said, and she's like, well, thank you. And I said, you know what you need to do? I said, you need to become vocal about this. You need to become vocal about this. You need to put it on social media. You need to put it out there. Be like, listen, you people, like, get to functional medicine, get into functional nutrition, get into these things, these foundations, because you're not just, you don't just need a hysterectomy. You don't just need to be put on a medication, So I loved what you said about that, but then we'll reverse even further to your wife having this diagnosis. I'm seeing this more and more and talking to more and more clients that you can never have children. Right. And then all of a sudden they start trying, and before they even look at the basics, they're putting you on all of these crazy hormones and doing all this stuff to try to help you get pregnant, when a lot of it is super basic stuff. For my case, I was told I was not going to have a second child. All it was my thyroid was out of whack, So anyway.
And you said something really neat that I'd like to run on a little bit that way. Is if you think about the basics. Now, I'm 24 years old at the time. My wife is 23. Obviously, we just started dating. I wasn't a doc yet. And one of the major conditions she suffered with since she was young was endometriosis. And so I understand, and it got really bad to where, there was a lot of bad things happening to her to the point when she got her period, it felt like her skin was ripping off her arm and stuff like that. That's how severe it got. And there's a lot of women that have sufferred like that, even still today. But what happened was this, and this was something that I think we need to talk about, because as we look at all the thinkings, it's going to just surprise you. But functional medicine thinking isn't much different from medical allopathic thinking. That's why it's called functional medicine. Okay. Mm-hmm. And because here's what happens this, we have more natural things ever in history, and we have more medical things ever in history, and people are just as sick as they were even 20 years ago. And we have more people throwing nutrition down people's throats ever in history. And even decent stuff. But once again, the thinking is still the same. And so I want to kind of give you an example, and then I'll show you where that there's a big time basics that are missed the boat. And even when people really say, oh, doc, I've had my hormones tested. Well, I could probably prove that wrong, but let me explain. So I always tell people, whenever you look at, there's really two forms of healthcare. There's actually, and we're going to use the example of this. I always tell people, if your house catches on fire, you're going to call the fire department because they're the best professional and they have the tools to put out the fire. They have an axe and a hose. Knock down your door, knock down your window. They actually come into your house, spray it all down. Cool. They put out the fire. God bless. Stop your whole house from burning down. But that professional could never rebuild your house, even though they destroyed it through the process to save it. Okay. You need a carpenter to look at and go, I need a blueprint. I need to build it. I need raw material, and I can build it and I can maintain and keep it well. Now, I know I'm running through this quickly because we only have so much time, but I give a little bit more time for an example. Medicine is like the fire department, drugs and surgery, axes and hoses. And what happens this, but the thinking is, okay, we're gonna put out the fire. Okay. And a lot of our natural medicine today is, instead of taking this drug, let's use something natural. Okay. And what happened, and it's very common today, and that's why even Jeffrey Bland, who started functional medicine, that's why you see a lot of the concepts. But no joke, people start natural things and still just end up as sick as possible because they're missing the blueprint. Now, let me give you an example where I was 24 years old and I looked at my wife's, because I'm a carpenter doctor. Okay. And I've trained all practitioners, medical doctors, chiropractors, everything, every profession. I get to speak on some of the biggest medical stages on history. Literally, I just got asked this morning, to be in a movie on fertility that will be in theaters probably by the end of this year. And I had to fly to Austin, Texas. Actually, the thing just called me. I was being interviewed here. Because what happens is my concept of female hormones is still dramatically different than anybody in the world. Because let me show you this. So all of a sudden, and there are doctors that I've taught that now do this, that are part of my company and things like that. But when I was 24 years old, I looked at my wife having endometriosis. Well, we all know this just in general, especially if you're a woman, it's more of an estrogen dominant condition. Well, here's the thing. And I want everybody that's listening to this podcast right now to answer this one question. We know that males dominate testosterone. That's one of their major sex hormones that help develop who they are. But Connie, I'm going to ask you this, okay? What is that major hormone that makes a woman a woman? Now, we both have all of them, but there's dominant ones of levels. So what do you think it is for women?
Well, to the common population, everyone thinks that it's estrogen. And actually, that's why males are afraid of it.
Yeah. Well, on top of it, but what if I told you estrogen is not a hormone?
I mean, I would probably be like, no, you're wrong.
Sure, until I prove you wrong. No, let me explain. Okay. And I'm not trying to prove anybody wrong. I'm trying to say, let's talk about the basics. Okay. So if you look at estrogen, so do me a favor, jump on Google and go on a lab and try to find me estrogen. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Estrogen is not a hormone. It's a term. And estrogen itself is not even a real term. It's estrogens.
Yeah.
And so what a woman will do is say, well, doc, well, estradiol. Where's all the rest of them? And here's where I'll tell you to this till this day. So people go to a functional medicine doctor, they even go to an integrative doctor, and they say, I measured the hormones. Okay, did you have blood and urine at the same time, done at the same time? Well, no. Then you still had an incomplete view, because when they looked at my wife's estradiol, which is the main cyclic hormone, but you still have all the rest of them. And believe it or not, estradiol isn't the biggest contributor. It's actually 4-hydroxy is the biggest contributor to breast cancer. And a lot of people say, 4-hydroxy, doc, what the heck is that? Well, see, that's what most women have no clue, that they have all the major hormones and then they're converted. And that's why they're called metabolites and everything like that. And there's a group of 10 that need to be measured. And I can still to this day, unless the doctor, I mean, this very humbly has been trained by us. You can go to a functional medicine, integrative medical and stuff like that, and they'll measure 1, 2, or even if they're lucky, 3 hormones. But how can you get the picture of a woman's hormones or a picture of a woman's life, both physically and mentally, which is their dominant hormones, without having a complete view? So I'm 24 years old. I called some of the largest labs in the world and said, can we measure these? And they said, yes, but why? And insurance doesn't pay for them. And so that's why people say, well, doc, I went to a practitioner and they measured, estrone and estradiol. Great, but you're missing all the rest. Why haven't they had those done? Well, the majority of people will not have them done, even in functional medicine, because they don't know how to get them back to normal. And that's why people say, well, doc, why isn't my medical doctor, my OB, and all these people, this is basic science, this is the basics of hormones. Why don't they have them measured? Because the tools and technology that they have to try to deal with them, they don't have it. There's no drug or surgery that can ever get even one of your estrogens back to normal. Giving a hormone replacement or a bioidentical doesn't get your hormones back to normal. You say, even if it's more natural, even if it's synthetic, it doesn't restore those things back to normal. I'm a carpenter doctor. I need to make sure that your house is normal. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why when people say estrogen is hormone, it's not a hormone. It's a term that describes many hormones. And on top of it, you need 2 tests at once. And saliva is not an accurate test. You need 2 tests at once, both urine and blood, to actually have your hormones tested properly. Otherwise, you are guessing at all the rest of them.
Now, I want to dive into this a little bit because I 100% agree with everything you just said there. When you started, I wasn't quite sure where you were going, but also
I know.
We are in this place also where we're being exposed to all of these xenoestrogens and stuff like that our bodies recognize as estrogen, but they're not, right? And so that's a whole other.
But it'll throw off the lab, and you can actually see those on the lab.
Yes.
See what happens is, but by just testing estradiol and estrone, you can't see those.
Right.
See, so being exposed to them, that's where the nice part is, because you can have a xenoestrogen that throws off your 2-methyl estrone or 2-methyl estradiol. But if you don't get that lab done, you have no idea if it's even come from a xenoestrogen or it's come from an infection, if it's come from a deficiency and stuff like that. And that's why having a complete view. So then when they looked at my wife's estradiol, they said it's normal. So therefore her endometriosis has nothing to do with her estrogen. I'm like, no. When I actually measured all of them, there was 4 estrogens that were off. And as I started to find out what causes those things to be thrown off, then start to rebuild the body like a carpenter doctor, her endometriosis started to resolve because her uterus went back to normal. So I know, see, this is the most basic biochemical thing there is. Yet it's not in the current practice of functional medicine, integrative or medical, because you know why? Because you'd have to give up that thinking like the fire department in order to even figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as this testing goes, I mean, there are some tests and we can elaborate on this. So a current favorite in more carpenter type medicine, right, is the Dutch test. Like that's one that's been being used. What testing are you using to zero in on these estrogens and hormones?
Well, for example, I know Mark Newman extremely personally. I'll be in the lab actually next Thursday.
Mhm.
So so I've worked with Dutch. I'm actually, no joke, one of the biggest clients in the world. But not just, remember, you need Dutch, but if you don't have blood
Right.
with it, you're missing.
Yes.
So I will be over in Portland at their lab, actually now discussing meeting with their whole team. But I know the owner of the company very well because he has one of the greatest labs in history. He really does. He's an extremely great scientist. Their data is impeccable. We actually help them a lot. We do. I'm actually responsible for some things on that lab itself, and they will tell you that because you look at the graphs and how they have a little menopausal marker. No joke, that was because what we were doing with them that way. But that's one. So remember, and I contacted, before Dutch even existed, I actually contacted Genova to get the urine metabolites, and then I contacted LabCorp to get the other blood stuff that way. And remember, that was 23 years ago. And it's kind of cool. And I put that together. We started doing it. So I actually didn't start with Dutch. Dutch wasn't my initial company, but they mastered it and they're the best out there right now. So, but you still need blood. You still need blood to get that done. So if you get the Dutch and you get blood done that way, it'll be life-changing.
Awesome. So let's dive into this. Because I have other thoughts, right? We've got, so do you find in a lot of these hormonal cases that you are stumbling on, do a lot of them have liver detoxification issues?
Yeah. Here, if you want to sum things up, and I know you'll love this because you have a wonderful podcast. I went through your website with a fine tooth comb, and you put out some beautiful stuff. So thank you for speaking some good stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
Because here's what happens. This is, if you ever look at hormones and see that the term metabolism is so messed up because people always think it's about weight loss. The term metabolism is, if you want to put a very easy biological thing and biochemical thing to understand with, think about conversion. You have to convert something fat soluble to water soluble to rid it. It doesn't matter if it's toxin. It doesn't matter if it's an adipose. It doesn't matter if it's a hormone, which is a fat soluble molecule. You have to convert it to go to different forms, or also rid it. If you don't rid it, it's going to circulate and cause breast cancer. But here's the point: is we have to get away from the word detox. Okay, because people then think that the liver is the most toxic organ. That's not true. The liver is the most high enzymatic organ in the planet, and it needs certain constituents to produce those enzymes and convert everything from fat, from hormones to poisons, to medications, to xenoestrogens, to heavy metals. It needs enzymes in order to do it that way. And you need sufficiency. And I will say this, nutrition being my background and stuff like that, and I will say this because I get very frustrated in functional medicine and integrative and all these people and all the natural people that are always looking for some magic superfood that was in the cane fields of India or down in Brazil that nobody had access to. How do we even survive and live? Okay. So the term superfood is so misleading because there's one superfood that has, if you go to every culture across the world, that has been used for thousands of years. And now it's not even done. And it's really sad. I'm seeing a comeback a little bit with it that way. But the most high dense foods and the best superfood on the planet actually is liver itself, but any organ meat.
Yes. Yep. I'm sure you've seen in all of the stuff that I put out. I'm a huge organ meat person. Actually, I think if you scroll back to my Instagram, you get a good laugh because we are avid hunters and we actually grind the organ meat. Yeah, we grind the organ meat up into our ground meat basically. And there's a picture of me on Instagram. I have a elk liver that is the most beautiful liver I've ever seen, and it's massive.
Yeah, they are. And see, think this way. And now think of it this way. When you eat liver, you have the high density, because you even go back to my nutrition books back in the early 90s. Organ meats dominate. People don't realize vegetables don't have a lot of vitamins. Yeah, they do. No, they have a lot of provitamins, and they have to be even converted in your liver to even make it. Like people say, do you understand you can't get fat soluble vitamins from vegetables, from superfoods, unless you call organ meats? Like I said, I want people to stop using the word superfood. There's only one superfood, organ meats. Okay.
Yeah.
But here's what happens: is when you eat liver, you give the capability of your liver to now regenerate. But when you eat liver, you have that high enzymatic process that can really give a sufficiency for a lot of that conversion and metabolism. And most people, I want you to think of this: being a carpenter doctor, if I'm going to build a house, I need hammer, nails, plaster. I need all the fixtures. I need everything that way. And so we're running around trying to manipulate little things with detox supplements or medications or aromatase inhibitors to manipulate things that way, and don't realize without sufficiency. No. There are herbs that have significant amount of constituents in to help the conversion processes that way. But for anybody that's going to just give an herb with no testing, you can hurt somebody. You can push a pathway in the liver with high enzymes. And if you push phase one, and I hate the word detox because it just acts like that's the major aspect of liver. Phase one and phase two. But if you push phase one and get to intermediate, you can't go to phase two, you can hurt somebody badly. That's why if you notice, people that can't convert aspirin from one form to another through the phases can actually be poisonous once they even take the aspirin. And so, but a deficiency in the enzymatic pathways can lead to a lot of problems. And if you are just taking herbs or taking something that can actually do that without testing, and you push it through a pathway, you can actually even hurt somebody. So that's why the natural field drives me nuts too, because I look at some of the things they're taking. I'm like, well, where's their lab? Well, we didn't have a lab. Then why would you even give the liver something without a lab?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So I have a client I've been working with. She had some major liver stuff going on, and we looked at labs, and we started a process to help her work on that. And it worked so amazing. She's like, my sister wants to do this with you too. And I said, well, I would have to see your labs. And that they stopped it. You know, of course they stopped it there. I said, but you could severely hurt somebody if you don't know what's going on, because I mean, the other part you have to think of, not beyond what you just mentioned, is anytime your liver is working on something, it's got to put it back into the body too.
Yep,
and so,
it does. And that's why when you hear about, different Herx reactions and things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you do things right, you can actually minimize that. You see, because once again, our digestive system is meant to handle some toxic things. It's just that most people's GIs are messed up too that way. And so it sets up people for some inflammatory things. Yes. And that's why people say, Doc, something, I want to start off with a detox. I don't even know what that means. But second of all, you're going to flood your system and push it in directions that's not capable of handling. Why don't you also go, you never ran, and go run 20 miles too, and tell me what you feel like the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's funny. And I hate using it. So every time I say the word detox, I literally I hate saying this word right now because it sounds so cliche. I said, but for lack of better terms, I'm going to go ahead and use it.
Well, that's why and I don't even like the word metabolism, even though that is actually a biochemical term. But when you get patients to understand that you're conversion, because remember, as you see in the Dutch test, you have to convert estradiol to the other forms. You have to convert in estriol. A lot of doctors know there's E1, E2, and E3, estrone, estradiol, and estriol. Estriol is actually a metabolite. You have to convert estradiol and estrone to estriol. Estriol isn't produced very at all, if at any. They haven't really discovered that fully yet that way, but right now it's mainly a metabolite. Now, metabolism is a conversion process. So when I see women that have weight, I'm sitting there going, you don't have a weight problem. You have a conversion problem, something going from fat soluble to water soluble. And that's why when people eat great and exercise and don't lose weight, it doesn't get rid of your conversion problem.
Well, and then let's talk about that a little bit, because the thing is it's something that I've gotten really crazy about preaching. I hate it. People want to come to me for weight loss. I hate that. I think when you get healthy and you get everything moving properly, and it
goes away,
then the weight goes away. And sometimes that takes time. It's not, and I will never be that person that's like, no, we are just going to eat nutritious food and eat in a caloric deficit and exercise, and bam, here you are, magic body. No, that's not how it works for me. And it's not how it works for me with my clients. But the thing about it is there are so many other factors that can be impeding that conversion process. There's stress. Stress is a huge one in our society right now. And if you can do everything in the world, but if you don't manage stress, you're in deep trouble. There's also a lot of other environmental factors far beyond nutrition.
Yeah, there is. And that's the thing. And so that's why, being the carpenter type doctor, remember, fires do happen. We understand that, you know what I'm saying? But fires are preventable. Now, yes, if your house gets hit by lightning, yes, if you walk outside, get hit by a car, you can have every conversion properly. It's going to be a bad day. Okay. And so what you need to do, and that's where individualize is so important for people to figure it out. But that's why I've always said since day one. So I just always came up with a catchphrase. And Durham, I have labs now that use, I said, we don't guess, we test. Do you understand? And it's always something I started back in the 90s, because when people want to talk about accomplishing health, remember, I mean this sincerely, you cannot rebuild a house with an axe and a hose. Drugs or surgeries cannot make your body normal. It can put out a fire, it can buy you some time, it can stop your house from crumbling down, but you need to test from the simple aspect of what each body needs. And that's where sufficiency, and being like a carpenter, every house is different. You go down your street right now, every house is different. There's different building blocks, or differently need it. Now, let's say you beat up your house for a while. There are some commonalities that we can start with, especially if it's male and female. Male and females are different, but there are some commonalities that we can do with that. If I'm looking for weight loss, okay, the number one thing I'm thinking is this way. I got to get sufficiency for the conversion aspect of those hormones to go from fat soluble to water soluble. But then it happens this. There's things that we do to certain organs that can really congest it, cause problems. And since we've been beaten on the liver a bunch, you got to remember, when you look at our sugar intake, okay, the reason why people will lose weight from stopping sugar is because number one, you really only have a couple tablespoons of sugar in your bloodstream at one time. You understand? Most people's blood sugar is way too high. So therefore it's got to be converted to fat because otherwise you die of hyperglycemia. And the first place it stores is the liver. Well, when that happens, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is probably one of the biggest contributors to hormone problems in the first place, okay? Because you actually mess with those conversion pathways because you got fatty liver, and then it starts storing fat in other parts of your body that way. And on top of it, for a man, it's so much easier that we stop sugar, our body drops dramatically. Now, that doesn't work for a woman as well. And what I didn't realize was going to get really popular when I started doing this in the 90s, I looked at cyclic women and realized that, listen, as their estrogens fluctuate, so does their fat storage in and out of their liver. Because that's why, ladies, that's why 1 week you put on your bra and it's all nice and full, and next week you put on your bra, it's a bunch of shriveled raisins, okay? It's because your body changes. But remember, because your body will produce estrogens, or excuse me, produce fat tissue during certain times, store it in your liver, store it in your adipose tissue, store it in your face, store it in your butt, because you need to produce certain hormones, and then the next 1 week it can take it away. So that's why if women actually try to judge their body based on a scale instead of their cycle, and I realized that women change 4 times in a month. So I divided and created different zones. And there's also an area that women cannot work in. There's sometimes their cycle, a woman should never work out because it'll actually deplete their fat tissue, which will make their hormones go bad, and they'll just get fat and sick anyways. And there's times that it's great to hit it intensely. And most women don't understand that. So they're exercising all the time. And it drives me nuts because I'm like going, I can show you women where I said, stop exercising during these weeks, and they lost weight. Okay. And exercise during this weeks and you lost weight. But if you did it opposite, you gain weight and you're sick and unhealthy.
Well, and that same thing kind of goes for nutrition during the different times in the cycle too, different insulin sensitivities and things like that. So yeah. During
that, just give you an example. So ladies, give you an example. Menstruation, when you have your period, should go for about roughly 5 to 7 days. I like 7, I really do. Because once again, if you don't menstruate enough, you're going to leave some tissue and estrogens in your system, which can build up over time. Because remember, when you do dump that tissue, you do lose hormone, which is good because you're supposed to, your first days of menstruation, you're supposed to do it. But ladies, got to be very careful during that day, that menstruation time during the period, because your hormones are very low. So therefore, if you exercise too intensely, if you do high intensity, now remember, when I say exercise, I mean high intensity difference. We are creatures of movement. We should always be moving every single day. But I would say watch your heart rate during certain times of your cycle, because when you're menstruating, you don't want to hit it hard. You're saying you don't, because once again, your levels drop and remember, if you remember, your hormones are anabolic. They're buildup. Okay. During that days 1 through 7, let's say, or 1 through 5, whatever, how you menstruate, your body's in a repair process. Your hormones are really low. You can't repair really quickly because your anabolics are low. Okay. And that's why you don't be grabbing weights and lifting weights when you're on your period and stuff like that. You're going to set up, because now what you can do is you're going to stress out your adrenals, and now you're going to drop your hormones even more. Your body's going to say, I need some tissue. And there comes your fat to produce a hormone. And so it's very key. Now, movement. Yes, you should move every day. This, because I know when I talk about women not doing that way, doc, I can sit on the couch. No, that'll make you fat and sick. You need to move. You're saying move every day. But as far as getting your heart rate up, be very careful during your period.
Gotcha. I love it. So what can we as humans, I'm not going to say women, what can we as humans do to contribute to optimizing our hormones? Like where do we start? What are some of the key things we need to focus in on when it comes to preventative, and maybe we're already sick when it comes to sick care?
Yep. Let's take some things that you need no doctor for. Okay. No practitioner, no anybody for. Number 1, get your hormones tested. They said, doc, I need a doctor. No, you don't. No, you don't. You can get labs done anywhere across the world without a doctor. That's one thing I do like about labs. They're a business. They need to make money. Okay. Which I want them to make money because they produce wonderful products. Okay. I'm a capitalist that way. Second of all, here's this, get your labs tested. Okay. First of all, it's tested. Second, here's what happens. Come back to this. You can't run a car without fuel. You can't build a house without proper material. I will, by a shadow of a doubt, I will say this. I know a lot of people argue with me, especially the vegan people, but all I have to do is run a lab on a vegan person and I can show that they're deficient.
It's bad.
But here's what happens this. It is. And I feel sorry for them. And I understand maybe you don't want to do it, kill an animal. I get it. I mean, I get the emotional aspect behind it. I don't want to argue on their emotional aspect that way, because I will just run a lab, and my concern is your health, because I'd rather see you live than the cow and stuff like that. Because I don't give a crap about the cow. I give a crap about humans and stuff. So I'll go kill the cow so you can live better.
Yes.
So I have more compassion towards humans than I do animals and stuff like that. So what happens is organ meats. Sorry, you can go to an organic butcher right now, and they sometimes have to just throw them out to get rid of them. People have no idea what they're missing. And they're wrong. And if you don't, now remember, you can go to an organic butcher and get them. You can eat them. You can cook them. You can make liverwurst. I have heart, liver, and kidney every single day. And now, do I eat more than that? Absolutely. But I have heart, liver, and kidney every single day. And here's what happens. If I'm traveling, what I do is just take a encapsulated form. There's great organ meats that you can get encapsulated. You really can. You can buy glandulars and stuff like that. Actually, I started taking glandulars when I was back in undergraduate, when I learned how incredible I stopped eating Taco Bell and went to actually organ meats. Not a joke. And I still remember Taco Bell was always my weakness. I remember I was in college sophomore year, and I realized how bad it was for me going through my education. And I remember going from 29-cent tacos every day to organ meats. It's kind of funny. But then what happens is that gives you great sufficiency. Okay. Even if you just start with some encapsulated liver. All right, ladies, that'll be amazing for you. Okay. But also men too. Third of all, here's what happens this. It's going to surprise people, but you got to be careful with certain vegetables. Okay. Got to be careful with nuts and seeds, because what they do, and this is just basic biology. For example, I'm not a fan of grains, because grains are tough for me, because you have to prepare grains really well to make them healthy. You really do. And most people will never do that. You can't really buy good prepared grains. Now, Durham, my wife and my mother during Mother's Day were making some amazing sourdough, but it was made over the course of days. You understand? Most people's lifestyle can't dictate that. Now, here's what happens. So therefore, but here was the key thing about the grains, the ones that we were making. They're so fermented that a lot of the anti-nutrients that come from them, and when I say by anti-nutrients, is you can eat a good organic grain that has phytic acid and other nutrients that will bind to your minerals and extract them out. And see, so once an animal eats those, so if an animal eats a grain, as long as it's a pure grain, not crappy stuff that makes their liver bad, but if they eat a good grain, and they'll convert it, and their actually digestive system is actually better handled than ours, and then we eat them, and we don't get all those anti-nutrients. You need to prepare. That's favorite look. And here's what people don't realize. People say, Doc, something. I grew my own milk thistle. And I just ate it like a leaf. Do you understand? There's nowhere in history, even in Chinese medicine and everything, that an herb was ever eaten directly. It had to be soaked. It had to be prepared. It was always in a liquid form. Because you know why? Because a lot of greens, a lot of nature protects itself from being extinct. And so that's why most bugs will bite on a plant and spit it back out, or spit a seed out, because it's painful for them because the enzymes. Well, humans don't have that kind of reaction to what animals do. So we eat them thinking they're good, because we can put them under a microscope, put them under a laser, and go, look at all these nutrients in here. Yeah, but there's also anti-nutrients in there too that can actually steal from other parts of your body also. And that's why gluten itself is don't look at gluten as an inflammatory thing, which it is. Look at it as an anti-nutrient. It'll bind onto other things and steal it. So why would you spend money on good food than eat crappy stuff and steal away from your body? Your body doesn't know moderation and stuff. So fermenting things really changes the dynamic of most things. And so I encourage people. So I eat sauerkraut every day. I take at least a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons every single day. My wife, my kids, my patients, people all across the world, that we try to encourage them. Now, people say, Doc, you're big and here's the next thing after fermented foods. Make sure you have your allergies tested. Okay. There's a big misconception of allergies, because the way people think, functional medicine has messed people up when it came to allergies. They've really done a disservice for the whole healthcare profession. Yes, I'm being critical because I can explain it, and you will, once again, you know anatomy and physiology quite well. I've seen stuff you put out there, and most people understand this. Because here's what happens: this allergies trump everything. Like, I'm allergic to eggs. Okay, people say, well, Doc, why don't you eat an organic egg? I say, good, I'll be organically dead. Okay, so there's no chemicals, there's no poisons, there's no herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers on it that way. But see, allergies, anytime that your body responds with an immune response to something that way, there's inflammation. And there's one thing that every doctor, from natural to medical to my idea of a carpenter doctor, will agree upon: Every disease condition starts with some inflammatory response, which means there's some immune response. Now, here's what happens. Here's where functional medicine has really done a disservice and actually lied to the public and actually misled people. There is no such thing as sensitivities. There is no such thing as intolerances. That is not an immunity. In other words, you're talking to a person that is background in immunology. There is no such thing as, food intolerances or food sensitivities. That's a natural people trying to live in a medical world and trying to create new terms that are not biologically congruent. Because if you look at how your immune system responds, there's 4 types of hypersensitivity reactions allergies, and they're all called allergies, type 1, 2, 3, and 4. And IgE is the most commonly one dealt with medicine because those are IgEs because they actually have medication for them.
Mm-hmm.
But type 2 hypersensitivity allergies deal with IgGs and IgAs. Type 3 deals with IgGs, IgAs, and IgMs, and type 4 deals with some certain T cells. So just because medicine only uses one, and then you try to change the definition of what an allergy is to fit in the world, to be accepted. Well, those are allergies and they're hypersensitivities. They're all hypersensitivities. There's just different immune reactions to it. And since you can die from, like I have a number 1 on IgE for an egg, that doesn't mean my other immune responses are not allergies. Mm-hmm. It's just that you're trying to be accepted by the medical field instead of teaching people real immunology. And so that when people say, well, those are sensitivities are not as important. They're just as important because the response is still an inflammatory response that you may never feel. See, if you look at cardiovascular disease, you go to the American Heart Association website. Do you know what the number 1 symptom is in 70% of the males that finally realize they have heart disease is? Do you know what the number 1 symptom is?
Mm-mm.
It's called death.
Well, there you go. that's
why. So you can have an IgG, and see all the things and swell up like I do and stuff like that, or you can have inflammation that's silent that you don't
mm-hmm.
feel, and that all of a sudden, like Charlie never had a sick day in his life and dropped dead of a heart attack.
Yeah.
No, you are judging things based on medical stuff, and that's why I tell people don't ever judge your health by how you feel. Get tested.
No. Yeah. So circling back to that, how do you feel about those IgE tests? Because there's so many people doing them now, right? You've got like Everlywell and stuff like that. They're doing these allergy sensitivity tests.
Everlywell is Everlywell is a joke. It's actually misleading because here's what happens. If you ever see an allergy test that tests IgGs, you have to there's 4 types of IgGs. And if you only test IgG4, which is very cheap, and Everlywell is not a lab company. They're actually a marketing company. Mm-hmm. And they're misleading people. They really are, and stuff like that. And you want some of this, and I will tell you this. People say, Doc, do you have any favorite diet? All diets work. Every one of them do, because you go, well, Doc, which I think is one of the dumbest ones on the planet, is this eat right for your blood type stuff. Mm-hmm. And stuff. That means there's only 4 diets for everybody. Okay. And we're all within the 4 categories. You're kind of crazy. It makes no biological sense. But I want you to think about this here's what happens. Every diet person has, they pull bad stuff away. Great.
Yeah.
I stopped smashing my toe and my toe swelling went down.
Yes.
Yeah. Big surprise. You say, and what happens is if you look at, and I love this, when you restrict your diet, and when people usually do this, let's say they do it Everlywell and they pull away 20 foods. Yeah. They also pay away the bad stuff too. I mean, in fact, they stop eating sugar, stop doing it. And, oh, Doc, it changed my life. Yeah. Because you just had self-control listed on a paper, and then you would be missing things that you were there. And I'm a person that loves allergies because that was how I became a doc. Uh-huh. That's how I became a doc. You say, it's just that I just get frustrated when I see uncredited labs that have no validity. And then I understand why the medical field tears on them. Now, the medical field doesn't understand allergies whatsoever. They really don't. Even allergists don't. You say, allergists are just pre-run guys to give you shots. So because you want to test the immune system, they don't know how to test it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had to bring that up though, because that's been something I commonly run into. People send me their allergy tests from like Everlywell or similar forms. Right. And I'm like, listen, this is not accurate. I'm sorry to tell you this. Nope. They're like, but it says it right here. I said, no. There's a lot of other factors involved with this.
Yep. Yeah. So, and immunology being my background, it's really easy to tell. And I'll pull a textbook and I'll say, look at this. Oh my goodness, the type 4. And then on top, there's 4 IgG4s and all you did is IgG4. So your testing is incomplete because you didn't test IgE 1, 2, or 3. It's no different than hormones. Oh, I tested estradiol. Okay, where are the rest of them? Right. So you can't judge your immune system, can't judge your hormones, can't judge your anything. It's like telling me your total cholesterol is what your cholesterol is. No, where's your small and large particles? Well, what do you mean? Exactly. You say, see, it's incomplete.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, you are full of information. You have a ton of stuff out there. If my listeners want to come find you, where do they do that at?
It's just simple, thewellnessway.com. You know, I always tell people, my videos just teach. We don't, because I'm against, it's gonna sound funny. This is me personally. I'm against people. I'm against selling products because here's what happens. Well, doc, there's a great, you even have an organic milk thistle, the best in the world. Yeah, but if you take that and you don't get tested, you can hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what I tell people. So my videos, everything are about like this, trying to get people to get tested. And you don't need me, don't need you, don't need a doctor, maybe to get tested, because that's how you start to work back on your body. And yes, I even cover the aspect of allergies and how people are not testing right, how they're not testing hormones right, how they're not testing the heart right, how they're not doing things that way. And that's why I get to speak on all stages, including medical. I literally speak at medical conferences more than anything that way, because I think we've seen it over the last years. We've been lowering cholesterol for 70 years. There's more heart disease than there is in history. We've been trying to, we have more pink ribbons in history, yet we have more breast cancer. I literally was just this morning, got called because they're doing a documentary on infertility. And they want me to be an expert on that panel. And it's gonna be a movie that will come out. And it's just because the stuff I told you today just makes a lot of sense, and it's all provable diagnostically that way. And if we can walk people through that, then they just need to find people that understand that kind of methods to actually help rebuild their house. So I tell people, what you need is a good tour guide. Because you know why? I can give you all the advice. You have to jump on the bus and take the ride. You can get off anytime you want instead of that. But so I just happen to have the map in order where to go. And that's all come from testing.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I will put your information in the show notes as well. That way everybody can come find you and get more information. And I'm really thankful that you joined me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the podcast, and continue to do great work you're doing.
Thank you.